Joining us on the phone is James Bullard. He is the president of the St. Louis Fed. Over the weekend, he caught some attention when he made the comment that we could see jobless rate climbing to 30% in this country in the second quarter. You could also see GDP slashed in half. President Bullard, thank you for being with us this morning.
Great to be here.
So walk us through how you get to those numbers and if that's still what you think the case is going to be based on what you've seen over the last couple of days.
Sure. We do have a blog on this now, expected macro performance during the pandemic adjustment period, so viewers can click on that. Excuse me. We want to focus on the second quarter, where I think most of the disruption will be. It seems like it's taking forever to even get to the start of the second quarter, but we got to plan ahead here, and it offers some focus. I want to think in terms of a national pandemic adjustment period, mostly Q2. Real GDP will be reduced on purpose to meet health objectives. We just heard doctors talking about essential services and nothing else. So it's essential services plus whatever can be produced at home. You got to think that that's probably less than half the economy. We've been trying to do different calculations, and you can check out the blog on that. But it's an investment in public health. It's not a recession as conventionally defined, because this is an intentional move being made here. It's a planned partial shutdown of the U.S. economy, mostly during the second quarter. If you look at these numbers, the U.S. GDP for a quarter is, very round numbers, is about $5 trillion. So if you cut that in half, you're only talking about producing $2.5 trillion, and that means $2.5 trillion less of household income that we would otherwise have. So I think the $2 trillion package looks like it'll pass the Congress now, is about right. It's scaled about right for this situation. And this is relief, not stimulus. We're not trying to move production into the second quarter. The whole idea is to hunker down, lie low, let the virus go away. But I guess my point on talking about this is that the numbers will be unparalleled. But don't get discouraged, because this isn't at all comparable to past events in U.S. macroeconomic history. This is a special quarter, and once the virus goes away, then things will, if we play our cards right and keep everything intact, then everyone will go back to work and everything will be fine. So part of that is that we want to use the unemployment insurance program, and I want to call that pandemic relief instead. And we certainly want to encourage heavy usage during the second quarter, because the whole point is to keep people whole and keep businesses whole during this period, so that they can get tided over and get over to the third quarter. So, and as far as the timeline, no one really knows, but this virus might take other paths on us here. We don't really know, but I think for planning purposes, we want to think about the second quarter as the big hit quarter.
Does that mean you're anticipating, at least at this point, that you could see a very sharp snapback back to normal levels for the third quarter?
So what I think would happen is if we play our cards right and the virus proceeds, roughly speaking, as it does in China, then the third quarter would be a transition quarter. There'll be talk about reinfection, all kinds of things, but businesses will be coming back online. And then at that point in the fourth quarter and the first quarter of next year, then I think you'd see boom quarters where there's a lot of production at that point, because there would be sort of a pent-up demand, and a lot of things that didn't get done and got delayed would all start to get done at that point.
James, what do you think just about the infrastructure? Are we going to be able to handle all the unemployment claims that come in? Are we able to get this money immediately to the people who need it the most and to the businesses that need it?
So I think that's a great question, and I think think of this as just one huge project, and we're going to quit tracking the economy during this huge project, and we're just going to try to execute the plan to keep everybody whole. And I think what you'll see is, a little bit of chaos to try to get this going. But I also think people will be inventive and be up to the task. They understand the situation, and we'll get the whole thing done. But it'll be, it's a big, sprawling country, and you've got lots of people affected here. So there are going to be lots of challenges ahead.
So, Jim, when you talk about...
Have you heard anything?
Oh, sorry, Beck. I thought...
No, go ahead, Joe.
Oh, when you mentioned something like 20 or 30% unemployment, that's a Rorschach test.
It's pandemic relief, Joe.
I know, but I'm just saying that when you mention that, it's a Rorschach test. Doom and gloom people looking for I don't know, Armageddon are going to say, if we, back in the crisis, had, in 2008 financial crisis, if we had 10, 12, 13% employment and the S&P, went below 700, if we get 30% unemployment, then why shouldn't the S&P reflect, be 3 times lower than it was during the financial crisis? And I've been saying it's because when you said that, you were talking about that as a quarter or 2-quarter maybe event, and that's not really an apples-to-apples comparison. Is it to look for lows in the market like that?
That's right, and that's why I say it's not comparable. So the time series would be by quarter, you'd have sub 4% unemployment, 4% unemployment, 30% unemployment, 4% unemployment, 4% unemployment, so that you'd have this huge spike, mostly centered in the second quarter. But everyone knows exactly what that is. That's pandemic relief that was done on purpose. And again, if we can get this to work right, everything will snap back to normal once this is over.
Steve?
Hey, Jim, I'm wondering if you could tell me how the Fed is going to loan to Main Street. Is the St. Louis Fed one of the 12 district banks gearing up to become a commercial bank? How do you get loans, both the Federal Reserve System and I suppose the St. Louis Fed, or money out to small businesses in order to tide them over through this very difficult period?
This is another great question. I haven't actually seen the language in the bill, and so I don't really have a good idea about this. We do lend, as you know, through the discount window to banks. So the simplest idea would be that the bank makes the loan to their small business that they know the customers all across the country, and that gets labeled as a pandemic loan, and that gets presented at the discount window, and then we lend to the bank. So some kind of mechanism that looks like that would be the simplest thing. Again, I think this is moving extremely fast, so you want to use systems that are already in place and channels that are already in place instead of trying to set up new infrastructure. If you try to set up new infrastructure, it might take you 90 days and the whole thing's over by the time you get to that.
Andrew?
Hey, Jim. Jim, one of the things I'm trying to understand, and I think it's where Joe was going with in terms of where the market is, I gather you think we're going to get back to 4% unemployment in relatively short order. The question that I'd ask you, though, about that prediction is you can look at places like Las Vegas, for example. Do you genuinely believe that Las Vegas is going to be up and running at the levels it was 4 weeks ago, come this fall? Is that realistic, especially given the fact that this continues to look like it's going to be a rolling crisis, given that we haven't had a meaningful lockdown? You're going to have people even in China they're opening up movie theaters. Nobody's in them, but when they do open them, people have to be spaced out, one seat empty to another seat empty. That could take a very, very long time. And so I'm just trying to understand your thinking in terms of what unemployment really looks like, and also what PEs are going to look like on these companies, what kind of earnings some of these companies are going to have.
Yeah, that's why I say the third quarter, again, everything depends on the virus, but the third quarter would be some kind of transition quarter where you can open things up and you take special precautions. You're worried about reinfection. but maybe testing will be better, maybe other factors will be better, and you'll have a better idea about where the virus really is. And then I think by the time, this thing is temporary. So at some point you'll be able to say, okay, this is behind us for now. I'm sure this is going to shape public health for a long time to come, but it is going to be temporary. And I think Wall Street should be valuing these companies knowing that this is temporary and knowing that there's a lot of great production laying out there in the future.
Jim, I want to thank you for your time today. Obviously, things are changing pretty quickly. We'd love to have you back. Give us an update as you get more details on how this is going to work and actually start implementing some of it.
Okay, super. Thanks for having me today.